Marriage equality. Well, welcome back to Hardball. That's New York Governor David Paterson today pushing for his state to legalize gay marriage. New York would be the 5th state in the country to allow gay marriage, joining Connecticut, Massachusetts, Vermont, and most recently, Iowa. Legislation's also moving in New Hampshire and New Jersey. So let's debate it. Gay marriage, yes or no? Pat Buchanan is an MSNBC political analyst, and John Solomese is the president of the Human Rights Campaign. Pat, marital equality. Do you like that phrase?
Well, I think, look, marriage is an institution between man and woman, ordained by God and also by human nature for the procreation of the human race. It's been recognized by religions and states as a sacrosanct institution, and the idea that you can redefine it by legislation is an absurdity.
But don't we have civil law that allowed for divorce even when churches did not? Don't we have cases where there's civil decisions about marriage that depart from church doctrine?
Well, sure,
the Church of England.
I'm not talking about church doctrine. I'm talking about natural law, Chris. The law of human nature, which is designed by God. And quite frankly, you cannot redefine. You can redefine it and say what it is, but that's playing let's pretend.
Is monogamy natural law?
Yes, monogamous relationship in a marriage is natural law.
But states have allowed people having serial marriages.
States have allowed polygamy in some cases, there's no doubt about it.
Serial marriages, one after another after another.
Yep, and that's monogamous relationships in a serial relationship.
You think that's natural?
I think, well, a relationship between a man and a woman for the procreation of children is natural. If the state passes legislation saying divorce is legitimate and now you can get remarried, fine.
And that's consistent with your natural law theory?
That's consistent with natural law, I think, but that's not consistent, obviously, with church law or God's law.
So we have three different bases of decision-making. Church law, natural law, as Pat sees it, and what's coming?
Well, I think what you've seen in the last week is a court decision in the state of Iowa, in a heartland state, which is a major development in the fight for marriage, and for the first time, legislatively enacted marriage in the state of Vermont.
What's your strongest argument when you meet with people who disagree with you? Why we should have the right to marry someone from the same sex?
Generally speaking, when you talk to somebody about the circumstances of our lives, when you talk about people who make a decision to make a long-term commitment, same-sex couples who are together for 30 or 40 years, and you talk about not just a recognition of that commitment, but the rights and responsibilities that go along with that commitment, the ability of two people who spend their whole life together to get one another's Social Security survivor benefits, or to make end-of-life decisions when we're at our most vulnerable. Most people come around on those issues, and most people come to understand that, in fact, the circumstances of our lives are very much the same.
Pat, what do you do with people that are gay, who have that orientation, and they live together for 20, 30 years? Are they allowed to create a bond that's legal?
Well, look,
why not have a bond?
If I knew a man and then two men together or something like that, and one of them was sick and dying, would I give his friend time off to go see him? Of course I would. But Chris, you cannot violate the basic laws of human nature and declare a sexual relationship between two men to be a marriage, because it's not. You can't simply...
What causes people to be attracted to each other within the same gender?
Chris, I don't know whether
it's natural. What is it?
I don't know whether it's nature or nurture, but it is not natural.
But if it is nature, then it is natural.
But look,
no, it is an aberration of human nature.
Well, that is your point of view, but in the context of the civil institution of marriage, the courts have said, that, as was the case in Iowa, in the question of the civil institution of marriage, that there is no difference between the circumstances of our lives and anybody else's, and have been made great pains to be clear that this has nothing to do with the religious institution of marriage.
As they say in Dickens, if the law says that, the law is an ass. Let me say this about, look, Chris, in Massachusetts, in California, in Iowa, you have judges imposing ideology on voters. In 29 states, every state where it's been voted on, people have risen up and said, for God's sakes, don't do this. We want this outlawed.
Well, is that true? What about the polling? Because the latest polling I pointed to when I spoke to your group a couple weeks ago was the latest vote in California, Pat, which is kind of interesting. It was 27% like to support the trend towards same-sex marriage. Then it was 37%. And most recently, this past month, it's 49% in California that support this trend. So there is a trend, Pat.
There's
You
no
got
doubt.
Well, there's a trend. There's not only a trend.
52% voted against it. 70% of African Americans voted against
Right.
it. 53% of Hispanics. But Chris, let's suppose they voted in New Hampshire.
What happens if it becomes reality? What is it then?
Well, what happens? Well, what's going to happen to America? America is a moral community, or it's ceasing to be a moral community. Take a look at the Episcopal Church, with which we're somewhat familiar.
Because nothing's going to happen in
It's smashed
America.
apart. It's falling apart. This country, Chris, is falling apart over moral.
He made a point that
Look,
this
the
is breaking
worldwide-
society apart. Let's make a secular response. Is there a secular response to what Pat says? Believe anything you will about God's will. Social behavior. Is there an argument to be made that it's a socially solid position to take same-sex marriage?
Look at the states where marriage equality has been granted. Massachusetts, 40-60. 40% of the people were for marriage equality. Now 60% of the people are for it. Because all of these gloom and doom scenarios, all of the fear that's put forth about what's going to happen to society, people realize none of it comes to be. And you're going to see the same thing in Iowa. You know, I mean, Iowa right now we're at about 40-60. I think the courts ruled, the legislature's not going to let it move, and you're going to see the same thing. The people of Iowa are going to live with marriage equality, and in a year, mark my
Your
words,
prediction, where are we going to be in 10 years on this issue?
Oh, I think it's probably, I don't doubt that things are moving in the direction of, quote, legalizing that. But I truly believe, I know you had Rick Perry on, I truly believe the unity that we once had is going. The United States as a community is dissolving.
Is Texas leaving because of this?
No, Texas, if you impose it on Texas, you'll get a more of a reaction than Vermont.
Thank you, Pat Buchanan, for juicing it up. Anyway, Joe Solomese, thank you very much.